Okay, last time we began this discussion of, obviously it's evident from multiple places in the Torah that if one causes damage to another person, so then there's of course restitution that needs to be paid. They need to pay up for the damage that they caused. And the question we're dealing with though is there a prohibition from the Torah of causing damage in the first place? And we saw from the Tur and then the Rambam that there really is. Oh, thank you. This is mine. There really is a prohibition from the Torah to cause damage, right? The Torah's language is the same way that kashem shasar ligno v'ligzol mechavero, just as there's a prohibition of theft and burglary, so too there's a prohibition of causing physical damage on another person's property. And it's a prohibition from the Torah, just like theft is. The Rambam makes it very clear, even if it's just going to be that not even direct damage, indirect damage, there's a prohibition of causing such damage. What we and we proved it from the Gemara in Kiddushin. The Gemara in Kiddushin on Membeis, we're on page 4 in the packet. The Gemara in Kiddushin on Membeis is the proof, really the proof text that shows us that there is a prohibition in the Torah from a prohibition in the Torah to cause damage to another person. And we learn this from the concept of shlichus, that I can hire someone to do something on my behalf and their action will relate back to me. The example that the Gemara is dealing with is from the Mishnah, that if a person wants to get married to somebody, let's say they've been dating somebody by Zoom in New York, and now they want to move forward with the marriage. So, it's COVID. I'm not going to get on a plane and go to New York to get married. So I'm going to send somebody that's in New York, a friend of mine. I'm going to appoint him to be my shliach. He's going to go stand under the chuppah. He's going to give the ring. He's going to say that through me giving you this ring, you are married to Yenim in La Jolla. So then the girl is married to the guy in La Jolla. That's called shlichus. It's like we mentioned from Rav Yosef Engel. It's like an extension of your hand. It's like your hand stretched out, like Basia, the daughter of Paro, that her hand stretched out. So you too also, when you appoint a shliach, it's like your hand is stretching out and you are controlling what is happening all the way out in New York. That's a concept of shlichus. But the Gemara has an exception to that rule. The exception to that rule is hiring a shliach, hiring an agent, a proxy to do something that is prohibited on your behalf, do something that's a prohibition, to go steal something for me, to go cause arson is the example that the Gemara uses. For me, the Gemara says that the person who acts, the proxy, the agent, they are responsible for their own actions. The actions do not relate back to me. And the Gemara calls that, uses the example of arson, as I send an intelligent person with a hot coal to go and do damage in someone's property. They are responsible for all the damage that was caused. I am not held accountable for that damage. Beis Din is not going to be able to extract any of the restitution from me. They are going to have to pay for everything. Why? Because ein shliach, there is no such thing as an agent, lidvar avera, in the context of a prohibition. What do we see from this Gemara? That causing damage to someone else is a prohibition, right? It's a prohibition from the Torah, right? That's otherwise this Gemara doesn't make any sense, right? So what we want to deal with, and it's important as we're beginning the Masechta, it's important for us to understand this concept. In fact, most yeshivas, when they learn Bava Kama, the opening shir is exactly this. In fact, just today I called Rav Hirsch Shlita to ask him a shaila, and I told him that we just started Bava Kama in the Working Man's Kola, and he said, did you go through the shtickle Torah that we did about whether or not there's a prohibition of to cause that? So because that's always the place you have to start when you learn Bava Kama, because it frames the entire everything we're going to be doing, right? Recognizing this not just a person making up a mistake that they did, that they need to pay up. But this is mamish, it's an Issur in the Torah, which is why the obligation of watching your property, watching your animals, taking care to make sure you don't cause damage is so critical. So
basically responsible for your actions no matter what.
No matter what, you're responsible for your actions. And not only that, if you're irresponsible,
right.
So then it's not only that you're just an irresponsible guy, but you're actually violating Torah law. So the question is, which pasuk in the Torah, what prohibition can we pin this on? I mean, you read through the 613 mitzvos. So what is the pasuk in the Torah? Where does the Torah say I'm not allowed to cause damage to someone else? We mentioned before, there's many places in the Torah that if you cause damage, the Torah says you have to pay for it. But where does it say in the Torah that it is prohibited to cause damage to someone else? That's where we're holding right now. So if we take a look at page number 5, the photocopy of the Psukim in Chumash, from the stone Chumash. It has 1048 at the top, is in the top right corner. So this is these are the psukim in the Torah, and one of the places in the Torah that discusses this, the psukim related to returning lost objects. Psukim related to returning lost objects. You have it, Gidon? Yeah, okay. The Torah tells us the following. We're going to read the psukim. I have it photocopied here in the English as well. Lo tir'eh et shor achecha, that you're not supposed to see the ox of your brother, or seiv nidachim, or the sheep, or the goat, v'salamta man, that is, it wandered away, and that you turn a cheek, you turn a blind eye to the fact that your friend lost this part of their flock. Heshev tashivim la'achecha. You're supposed to return it. You're supposed to return it to your brother. V'imlo karov achecha elecha. Now, if your brother is not near you, it really wandered very, very far, you found it in a place that's nowhere near him, v'lo yeda'ato v'asafto el toch beito, and you don't know exactly who it belongs to, so then you should bring it into your house. It's amazing, by the way, that the Torah is referencing a fellow Jew you don't know as achecha, right? Who doesn't know their own brother, right? And amazing, right? Even the Yidden we don't know, it doesn't matter. They're still achecha, they're still a brother. Okay, so you don't know him. You're supposed to bring it into your house, meaning because you don't know who to return it to. So you bring it into your house. And it should stay with you until your brother comes and he realizes I've lost this flock, and he'll figure out where it is. He'll find you. You don't have to find him. He'll find you, and he will be Derosh Achecha. He'll give you the signs to tell you that I lost my sheep. My sheep, weighed so much. It was, yay tall. It was this shade of gray or whatever it was. And that is good enough. We can give it back to him, assuming that he is the rightful owner. You apply this across the board by any object of your fellow. Anything that belongs to your brother, asher tova mimenu, that he lost, umatzata, and you found, lo tuchal lehisalim. You are not allowed to hide yourself. You're not allowed to remove yourself from the situation. You see your friend lost a basketball. You can't just pretend to not see the basketball. You need to go get it, and you need to return it. This is the mitzvah from the Torah of Hashavas Aveda. Now, if we take a look at the next page, on page number 6, in source 5, we begin to unravel a whole Pandora's box of what is contained within this mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, of returning lost objects. Where just from reading the psukim, we saw that there's 2 mitzvot. There's a positive commandment and a negative commandment. The positive commandment of Hashev Tashivam, of returning it, V'hashivosalo, returning the object, and the negative commandment of Lo Tuchal Lehisalim. By the way, one of my absolute most favorite drushas is on that pasuk of Lo Suchal Lehisalim. that the Al-Sheikh points out, lo tuchal alim, that you're not allowed to turn a blind eye. That's not what it says. Lo tuchal means you don't have, you're unable to. You don't have the physical capability to turn a blind eye. As a Jew, says the Al-Sheikh, that when you see that another Jew is missing something, is hurt, damaged, has a loss, we physically, we just, as a fellow Jew, do not have the capacity to turn a blind eye to when a fellow Jew is in pain. That's that lo tuchal alim. We just physically don't have the capacity to do such a thing. So we have over here.
That's why so many Jews are doctors, lawyers, people that are all about compassion and caring.
Taking care of each other. Taking care of each other. So it's what it all comes down to. That's what Reb Chaim Volozhiner said. The whole Reb Chaim Volozhiner is the way his son Reb Itzla Volozhiner writes in the introduction to the Nefesh HaChaim. That was written by his father Nefesh HaChaim, and then his son Reb Itzla wrote an introduction, and he has over there. He says that Margela Puma de Avia, that the pearl that was always on my father's tongue was that Reb Chaim Volozhiner used to say, Ein Adam Nivra Ela Lahoyel La'achrini. The whole purpose of the creation of man, was to be able to help others. The entire purpose of creation is to be able to help others. Lo Ein Adam Nivra Ela Lahoyel La'achrini. So lo suchal salim. That's inbred within every single Jew. So when we examine this obligation of Hashavas Aveda, so as we mentioned before, there's two sides of the mitzvah. There's the positive commandment and the negative commandment. The positive commandment of of actually returning the object, and the negative commandment, God forbid, of somebody not doing it. Okay. But we see that this mitzvah is much more expansive. You take a look at source number 5 on page 6, the Gemara B'Mitzion Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph says that this does not only apply to movable objects, doesn't only apply to basketballs or cattle or whatever it might be that could be something that would end up in a lost and found. Rather, it includes even property itself. Take a look at the Gemara by line number 1 across from the arrow in source 5. Amarava, l'chol avedas achicha. Now, what does it mean when the Torah says l'chol avedas achicha? Anything that your friend could have lost, l'rabos avedas karka. This coming to include the loss of land, the loss of property. How do you lose property? Right? It's not going to walk away on you like a sheep.
Earthquake.
Right, then it might move a little bit. Or Jack can move mountains. That's yeah. But so what does it mean that the loss of property? What it means is the property could end up getting damaged and a loss can be incurred. What would be such a scenario? The Gemara continues. That there's a brisa that supports this idea that the following scenario. Let's say you see there was a dam that broke, and your friend's property is at risk of being swamped out. So you see this happening. Anything you can do to try to prevent it, if there's something that can be done, that you could barricade the property somehow to prevent it from getting ruined. So one is obligated to do such a thing, right? For example, if there was, this is a perfect example, that there was a horrible storm coming, a hurricane or something, it's a horrible storm coming, and you see your friend who's on vacation had left open his shutters and the whole house can get destroyed. So lo suchal salim. You're not allowed to turn a blind eye. You need to go and to fulfill the mitzvah of hashavas aveda, of returning something that could potentially end up getting lost. Preventing a loss from being incurred to your friend is part of the mitzvah of hashavas aveda. We continue at the bottom.
Assuming it's going to be dealt later, but at what expense to yourself?
That's a very good question. Yeah, we're going to get to that's going to be a machlokas in the Rishonim. How to deal with that. But yes, that will be dealt with, Mike. In source number 6, another expansion to this mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, that it doesn't only include movable objects, it doesn't only include preventing a loss to your friend, but even continuing in the following scenario. God forbid that your friend's life is at risk. The Gemara in Sanhedrin on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph, source number 6. Gufa minayin leroes chavero shu tovea banar. You see your friend is drowning. Ochaya goroso. Or you see, and this is really getting to your question, Mike. You see that there's an animal that's attacking your friend. Olistim bayanalov, or you have thieves that are that are mugging him. Shuchayev letzilo, you are obligated to save your friend from that imminent threat. Tamalomar, lo ta'amod al dam re'echa, you're not allowed to stand idly by on your friend's blood. V'hamahacha nafka, says the Gemara, you don't need to learn it from that pasuk. Mehasam nafka, you can learn it from there, from avedas gufa minayin. How do you know you have to save your friend's body, their physical body? Minayin tamalomar hachivo solo. Learn it from Hashavas Aveda. From Hashavas Aveda, if I need to save my friend's property, certainly I need to save their physical being itself, right? If their life is in danger, I need to go and save them. Now that certainly is open for discussion as to what about if it's going to be at a risk to me. But let's assume all else is equal. It's not going to be any risk to me. I'm a certified lifeguard. I'm going to be able to save him. He doesn't know how to swim and he's drowning. I'm a professional lion tamer, and I can take down this lion, no questions asked. Not going to be a problem. Okay, whatever it might be, why you don't think I can do it? Whatever it might be. So if there's something that his life's at risk and I could save him, so I'm obligated to, based off of what? The concept of Hashavas Aveda. We expand the mitzvah even more. Take a look at the next page. The Gemara in Bava Kama on Pei Aleph on the base. Source number 7, across from the arrow, line number 1. Bava Kama Pei Aleph on the base. The Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan. A rabbi thought that Haroah Chavero To'eh Ben Hakramim. If, let's say, your friend is lost in a vineyard, or lost in a cornfield, right? They can't see the road back to get back on the road to go back home. So you see them there. So says the Gemara, there's a mitzvah. Mafsik v'oleg mafsik v'yored ad shmelo le'ir l'derech. So says the Gemara that you're supposed to help them get back onto the road. If you see somebody lost, you're supposed to help them get back on the road. Where does this come from? You skip ahead a little bit to the next underline. Hadol Raisahu. This is a mitzvah from the Torah, the Tanya. Hashavas Gufo Minayin. We learn from the pasuk of Hashavas Gufo of returning someone's physical body. Tamalomer Vashivo. So we learn it from the fact that there's a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, not only making sure they don't incur a loss, not only making sure you save their physical life, but also to make sure that they don't get lost, that you help them find their way. Okay, it's an expansion of this mitzvah of lost and found of Hashavas Aveda, right? If you could only imagine if the makers of Waze, which is, it was produced in Eretz Yisrael, right? So imagine if they had kavana when they made their product, right? Of fulfilling the mitzvah of Hashavas. Maybe they did. Maybe they're getting tremendous zechuyos, right? For all the people that they're getting, right? I'm not joking. Mamish, it's Hashavas Aveda, right? It's a mitzvah from the Torah. The Had al Raisahi. From there, right? That's what it says in the Gemara. So we've expanded it also to helping a person find their way. We're going to expand it even more. Take a look at the bottom, Minchas Chinuch. We're going to see how this all comes together soon. The Minchas Chinuch was written by the chief rabbi of Chernobyl, who passed away in 1878. Was a tremendous gaon, tremendous Torah scholar. he was so poor. Rav Hirsch mentioned over Shabbos when he was here. I've heard him say it many times. He was so poor that he couldn't afford the paper and the ink to write a sefer. He wrote the whole thing in acronyms. Yeah, he wrote the whole thing in acronyms. In fact, the original copies of the Minchas Chinuch are exactly like that. Even some later editions. There's a copy the shul has like that. Basically the whole book is acronyms. So up until probably like 50 years ago, maybe less, the Minchas Chinuch was the exclusive domain of Talmidei Chachamim that were actually able to learn it. Like Rav Shechter, for example, he uses the old copy of the Minchas Chinuch. He's so used to it. He uses the old copy of Minchas Chinuch and he reads it no problem. For me, when I open an old copy of Minchas Chinuch, it takes me like an hour to read one line because I'm just trying to decipher the code the entire time. But the Minchas Chinuch was unbelievable. Rav Shechter says that if someone were to just know what is in the Minchas Chinuch, they could fake being the Gadol Hador. Okay, if you just know what's in the Minchas Chinuch, you could fake being the Gadol Hador. So the Minchas Chinuch, take a look at source number 8 over here at the bottom of page 7. He expands the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda as well. This one's amazing. He says, we know that there's a mitzvah of tochacha. What's the mitzvah of tochacha? Of rebuke, right? Of rebuke. Tochacha is like the Torah has. Moshe Rabbeinu gave tochacha to the Jewish people, right? Of making sure you stay on the Torah's path, because otherwise, God forbid, something can happen. And not only that, but there's a mitzvah. If you know a friend of yours is involved in something that they shouldn't be, to help them get back on the straight and narrow. That's the mitzvah of tochacha. Says the Minchas Chinuch the following. Take a look at source number 8. He says, Nira li d'chiyav hatochacha hi, that the mitzvah of tochacha, he says, the chutz ma'asezu, aside for fulfilling the mitzvah of hocheach tochiach es amisacha, he says, you also fulfill line number 5, the v'gam v'hashevoso l'rabos avedas gufo, that you fulfill the mitzvah of hashavas aveda. That when you help someone do teshuva, you fulfill the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. It makes a lot of sense.
Getting them back on track.
Get him back on track. Helping a lost soul, right?
Yeah.
Continues and he says, Alachas kama v'kama im yachol, line number 7, im yachol hatzilu min aveira. If you could save someone from a sin, do avedas nafsho. It's like a lost soul. V'gufo rachman litzlan. That God forbid they should continue to act that way. You save them, you return a lost soul. He says that for sure the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda would apply in such a scenario. And the prohibition of Hashavas Aveda, of ignoring someone who is troubled, that could potentially you could have an influence on, and you ignore it, that would be a prohibition of lo tuchal lehisalim, right? So we've expanded the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda now. Oh, there's one more. And on page 8 in source number 9, I forgot about the Rambam. The Rambam expands it even further. I mentioned before, Mike brought up medicine before, that the Rambam says, who was a doctor himself, in source number 9 on page 8, that the Rambam in his Parsha Mishnayos, in his commentary on the Mishnah, Masechta Nedarim, he writes, Chiyuv harofel min haTorah l'rapos choli Yisrael, on the second column, line number 1, is a mitzvah from the Torah for a doctor to provide medicine for a fellow Jew who is ill. This is included in what it says in the Torah of the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. Included in that is providing medicine. L'rapos es gufo, to heal someone's heal someone back to good health. Shuhu kisharoa so masukan v'yachal atzil. You see someone is ill and you're able to save them. Oh, begufo mono chachmasa. Whether it be physically you're able to help them, financially you're able to help them, or with your wisdom you're able to help them. No matter what, there is a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. So we've expanded this mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda to not only just returning someone's basketball, but making sure that we are looking after each other's property. That if there's a loss that you see can be incurred on someone's property, the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda applies. If someone is in physical danger and you save them, so then that also is a mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda. If someone's lost and you get them back on the proper on the road, that's a mitzvah of hashavas aveda as well. The minchas chanach, returning a lost soul, helping someone do teshuvah, is a mitzvah of hashavas aveda. The Rambam includes medicine, providing medicine is a mitzvah of hashavas aveda. What does it all come down to? The mitzvah of hashavas aveda was, as we mentioned before, carries with it both the positive commandment of returning the lost object or doing all of these actions, as we mentioned, providing medicine, helping a person get back on track, helping a person do teshuvah, preventing a person from incurring a loss, all of those different examples. There's the positive commandment, but also the negative commandment if one does not. If one does turn their cheek and one turns a blind eye and does not help or does not do any of those things we said before that are included in this mitzvah, you violate a negative commandment. Says the Stipler Gaon, says Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, the father of Chaim Kanievsky, who passed away in 1985, was a major genius from the town of Hornesteipel. That's why he's called the Stipler Gaon. Happens to be my favorite author. The Stipler is unbelievable. I just learned to Stipler with the guys in Sky High. The Stipler, he says that based off of all this, you could suggest that this is the source of the prohibition in the Torah of causing damage to your friend, right? That if there's a prohibition in the Torah from not saving your friend's property if it can potentially incur damage, and not providing medicine, and not helping a person get back on track, and not helping a person do teshuvah, and not returning the lost object, and all, eventually what that means is that there's a prohibition from the Torah of hurting a fellow Jew, of not helping a fellow Jew. There's a prohibition from the Torah, an actual prohibition that we can pinpoint. What is the pasuk we're going to point to? Lo tuchal le'esalem. So if I have a Rottweiler, right? There's nothing wrong with me owning a Rottweiler, but if I have a Rottweiler and I don't keep it on a leash, right? And I just let it roam, that is a prohibition of lo tuchal le'esalem. Follow? So it's not
still your action, even though it's committed by another person.
Oh, for sure.
It's still your
So
responsibility.
totally my responsibility.
Incidental damage.
Totally my responsibility. I'm responsible for everything, and I violate a prohibition from the Torah of lo tuchal le'esalem. Take a look at page number 9. We'll read the language of the Stipler inside. With the Stipler Zatzal, he writes the following in source 10. Venera, it would appear the following. The Yesod ha'isr lahazik mamon chavero, that the source of the prohibition of causing damage to your friend, nilman medin hashavas aveda. We can learn from the mitzvah of hashavas aveda, shechayavaso Torah lahatzil mamon chavero, that the Torah obligates us to save our friends, to help our friends financially. Afilu, line number 4, mafsid, even if they're going to incur a loss, shelo ba al yado, that should not come to them. V'huzar belav, and there's also a negative commandment, de lo suchal le'esalem, line number 5, of you're not allowed to turn a blind eye. The kol shekein shechayev shelo yazik biyadayim, then certainly, all the more so, you're not allowed to actually cause damage yourself. You're not allowed to cause damage yourself. So this, says the Stipler, is the source for the prohibition of causing damage to your friend is lo suchal le'esalem, is the negative commandment related to turning a blind eye by lost objects, as is pointed out by many examples in the Gemara and the Rishonim and the Achronim, expands to just the general concept of ignoring the responsibility we have for our fellow Jews, of making sure we're all taken care of. And therefore, if I'm not taking care of my property and letting it just roam wild and letting, just feeling this entitlement that my property can just do whatever it wants, that is a negative prohibition in the Torah of lo tuchal le'esalem. Yeah,
So
Mike.
this country has a Good Samaritan law, but you have no legal obligation to act under the Good Samaritan law. In Britain, they have a Good Samaritan law, which is all of this.
Really?
You have a legal obligation.
You have a legal obligation to
act.
So in the Torah, we have clearly a legal obligation of a Good Samaritan law. Yeah. And not only will I say that it's an obligation of of doing the action of Hashavas Veda. That's why I mentioned before that it also carries a prohibition,
Right.
right? It also carries a prohibition,
Right.
right? It's amazing. So there, I just want to close. If you take a look, we have to, I have the women's class in just a couple minutes. So, you take a look on the last page, on page 10. Yeah. So he has right at the beginning of the piece. This is all from the same Simon, from the same chapter in the Kilas Yaakov, right? This is what I said. The right first thing you have to discuss in Bava Kama, so right, Kilas Yaakov, and this is on Masech the Bava Kama. This is mamish the first thing. Simon Aleph is the first thing he's discussing is exactly this. So we're following the direction of the Stapler going. So he points out in the first footnote over here in the Sefer on Bava Kama that three other psukim we can point to in the Torah that are the source for the negative commandment of causing damage to your friend. Okay, of pointing to a pasuk in the Torah that tells me there's an obligation to make sure that I watch my property, that I'm responsible to make sure I don't cause damage. In source number 11, by the check mark on the left side of the page, line number 1, Hiruni lebir hagra. They pointed out to me the Gra writes in Choshen Mishpat, Shekasav, line number 2, Kivan de Torah Nezikin Assur, that is prohibited to cause damage in it's a prohibition from the Torah to cause damage. And he says Veshuv Hiruli biyad Rama, and the Yad Rama says that this comes from the following. Shekasav, the end of line number 3, Shekasav the Assur Mishum Lifnei Iver. What's Lifnei Iver? Lifnei Iver is
Stumbling block in front of the blind.
putting a stumbling block in front of a blind person. So that's the pasuk from last week's parsha, Parshas Kedoshim, of Lifnei Iver Lotite Mechshol. You're not allowed to put a stumbling block in front of a blind person. Now the Gemara makes it very clear in a number of places, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, and a few different places, that the prohibition of Lifnei Iver is not, the pasuk is taken figuratively, not literally, right? It's not that it's not that the prohibition is literally placing a block in front of a blind person so that they stumble. The prohibition is causing someone who's blind in certain areas to stumble. So, giving someone bad advice, causing someone to trip up and violate an Isser, to violate it, to do an Avera. For example, like giving wine to a Nazir, right? You encourage a Nazir, the Nazir's at the table. Oh, you have to try this this glass of wine. It's amazing wine. He's a Nazir. You can't have any. There's a prohibition of Lifnei Iver. I once asked Rav Willig Shlita, is one of the Rosh Yeshiva at YU, a major posek, and I asked him once about if you have someone at your Shabbos table who's an alcoholic, right? So he said that if a person, if they're really going to struggle with it, so it's better you should serve grape juice. Otherwise, it'd be a prohibition of Lifnei Iver.
So I knew
Right?
you had the chocolates from all the adults at
Yeah. So I actually once asked him that also. It's interesting, Mike, to bring it up. Now I'm forgetting what he said, but I asked him once about someone who's pregnant that has gestational diabetes. One of my family members loves Laffy Taffies, and when they were pregnant. So I remember my father wanted me to ask Rav Willig if it's a problem having Laffy Taffies at the table because of the concern of gestational diabetes, of having Laffy Taffies out. I forgot what he said, but yeah, these are so. But what's amazing about this Yad Rama, the Yad Rama says, oh, Lifnei Iver is the source for causing the prohibition of causing damage. Hold on, Lifnei Iver is not to be taken literally. Here he's saying, no, if you read the pasuk literally, that's the source of you are not allowed to put a stumbling block to have your property cause damage to someone else in front of a blind person. So he's reading the pasuk. If the Ein Mikra Yotzim B'dei Pshuto, if you read the pasuk in the most simple fashion, says the Yad Rama, that is your source.
Read it figuratively. It can mean the same thing.
No, because it means, tripping someone up, in a, by giving someone bad advice or causing someone to sin. But this is causing damage to somebody, physical damage to somebody. So here he's reading the pasuk literally, and then there's your source. Okay, another one. The Yad Ramah continues. He says, simple. What's the pasuk? That's it, right? Would you want me to have a wild animal loose in my house? No. So therefore, you shouldn't have a wild animal loose out on the street either. So we need to make sure we take care of each other. You can't drive whatever speed you want to on the highway, just like I'm not going to drive any speed I want to on the highway. We need to take care of each other. You have to.
So you could use that
Yeah.
pasuk actually just as a
For anything.
blanket for everything.
Yeah,
It's gonna-
that's it. Takes care of everything.
Why didn't we start with
But you have to be
that?
consistent. But you got to be consistent.
You do. And then the last one, which Dave's going to say the same thing, is the last one is he quotes from the Rush, that the Rush in the Chuvas says that the source is Darcheha Darchei Noam v'chol nesivaseh shalom, that the ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness and peace. And that is a mitzvah. Really, it's the overarching message of the Torah. It says basically the Rush, you don't need to point to a pasuk in the Torah to tell me something like this is prohibited. You know it's wrong. Sometimes it's like Rav Govich used to say to us, what's the pasuk in the Torah that tells me I'm not allowed to put a cat inside of the Aron Kodesh? I just know I can't. It's not like all you do, you just read you just know. So certain things you just know. It's part of what we like to call the meta lesson of the Torah. The meta lesson of the Torah is I don't need the Torah to tell me I'm not allowed to punch somebody in the face. I don't need the Torah to tell me that I need to make sure that my Rottweiler is on a leash. I know. What?
Do we not need the Torah?
For certain things, when you have a full perspective from the Torah, so the Torah doesn't need to be direct about every single thing. Exactly. Once you have the full picture, so then you know how to apply the Torah accordingly. Yeah. All right, good. We'll stop here for now. God willing, next week, we're going to start the first Mishnah. We'll start the first Mishnah, and the first chat is going to be exciting. Okay, Bava Kama, here we go. Okay, guys.
It's really a nice package.
Yeah.